Yep, we wish Pastor Israel was here too. Pastor Central Victoria, he is in Paraguay, and I've been getting lots of texts with little videos of their services there and what they're doing, and it's wonderful. It's part of an extension at B4, moving out beyond the walls, not just of our building, but of Beaverton and of our country, and it's just beautiful. I'm so excited to hear what happens in Paraguay because of investments that you guys make in this. It's so lovely. I'm Bo Stern Brady. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm at the end of a cold, but don't worry, I've got pockets full of cough drops up here. I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna take a nap after this. It's gonna be great. We are in, also be praying for our high schoolers. They're at winter camp right now, and it's just such a yay, yeah. Cassandra's parents are like, pray for her. Pastor Cassandra is there with a bunch of high schoolers. They normally sit right here, and it's all on you guys to be very noisy and excited and all of that. They're so fun, and they're there hearing from God, and I think it's such a big deal when we get teenagers away just from their cell phones for a weekend. That's a big deal. I mean, it is for us. And so I think that God has a real opportunity to move in these times. Some of the big things that happen in my life happen at camps, and both as a student and as a pastor, and so be praying for them. They're there through tomorrow since it's President's Day, so they've got an extended time away, and we're so thankful for that. Last week, we're in week 3 today in our series in Colossians, a letter that I love so much, written by the Apostle Paul and Timothy to the church in Colossae. We've talked a lot about Colossae, and that Paul is writing to this city that he didn't ever visit, but he just wants to encourage them primarily about one thing, and it's that Jesus is supreme. He's all that they need. Excuse me. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's a Christological book. So Jesus is the centerpiece of it in every possible way. We're going to do a little handoff here. It's going to be really slick. Thank you. Jesus is the centerpiece of it. And last week, Pastor David did such a great job helping us see in Colossians 1:15 this idea of Jesus is the fullness of God, that all of God is in Jesus and all of Jesus is in God. Everything you see in the New Testament that you see Jesus do is what God would do. And so we see the fullness of God in Jesus walking the earth and speaking God's language to us in our language, helping us understand him, bridging the gap, bringing us together, doing something that we couldn't do ourselves. I love in the Message translation, it says, the word became flesh and moved into our neighborhood. And that's what happened when Jesus came. And so we looked at that because see, in Colossae, the people didn't question whether Jesus was God, and they didn't question whether he was good. They questioned whether or not he was enough. And so they had begun bringing other gods into the picture and other things into the picture. And so Paul is explaining to them that Jesus is all you need. Jesus first, Jesus last, Jesus only, Jesus always. Paul is always explaining that to them. And so David looked at that last week, and now this week we move right into Colossians 1:21, and it says this: once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, have become a servant. So I love this first line. It's a big, big one. He says, once you were enemies in your mind, you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. We're going to unwind this sentence, and we're going to attempt to get to the heart of it. It's a big one, and it's an important one, and there are a couple of ways we could interpret it. There's a couple of ways we can interpret every scripture. Actually, I love it when people say things like, I just want to go to a church that just preaches a word. They don't interpret, they just preach a word. And I'm just going to say, when you read a Bible in English, it's already been interpreted through somebody. Somebody's already decided what that Greek verb means, what that Hebrew means. We're always trying to understand what was God wanting to say in this text. And so I think I'm going to interpret this a specific way because I think it's the right way. But you can read it and ask the Lord, well, what do you want to say to me through it? But I think this is one of the most important truths from this little passage today that we can get our heads around. I think this truth that we're going to look at today will be life-changing truly, not just the way we say things, that movie was life-changing. This is actually life-changing if we can get our minds around it and if we can understand it. And so I want to just camp on it today for a little bit. In the previous section, David explained to us that we were looking at the preeminence of Christ. He's not just prestigious, he's preeminent. And now he moves on to some very bad news. He comes out of a passage rich with language of hope and triumph and beauty and all the good things. And now he just is right in there with the dark cloud, the doomsday, the bad news. You were alienated from God. You were enemies of God in your mind. And so alienated in the Greek means a non-participant. I was looking, Cliff and I went home last week and watched the Super Bowl, even though we're totally football posers. We have no skin in the game at all. We like the commercials and we like to see a good fight one day out of the year, but we haven't watched it all year. So we were some of those like onlookers from the cheap seats. And while we were watching that, I Googled ticket prices. Right. Yes, sir. They were very expensive. Like $11,000 was about the cheapest, your little entryway into the Super Bowl. Unless you were famous, then they pay you to go and let you get in for nothing. But it was really expensive, and those seats were even terrible seats. Like I had a better seat through my television than they had being there up in the stands. And I think sometimes I was thinking, like, what seat would I want if I went to the Super Bowl? And what I decided was I wouldn't want a seat. I would want to be in the game. I've told you already that I grew up wanting to be an NFL player. That was my very dear dream. And I would want to be in the game. Who wants to go and just watch? You want to be in the game. You want to be a participant. You don't want to be in the cheap seats. And that's what Paul is saying here. You've been alienated from God. There's a whole game going on, and you are looking on from the cheap seats, and something is keeping you out. It's keeping you from moving in to what God has for you. And if I told you that I had something very valuable, let's just say $3 million. If I had $3 million for you, and I'm going to stack it here on this stage, but you have to get to it from that door, and something is going to be in your way, what would your first question be? What's going to be in my way? Is it going to be some hurdles, or is it going to be a pit of vipers? Is it going to be lions? What is in my way? Because that will determine whether or not it's worth it. That will determine whether or not you think you can do it, and how you'll approach it, and how you'll handle the thing that's in the way. And Paul is saying here, something is in your way. First, he said, last week, he said, Jesus is everything. You were created for him and through him. He is the fullness of the Godhead. He is hope in you. Christ in you is the hope of glory. And now he's saying, but something is in your way. Something is trying to keep you from that. Something is trying to hold you back. And then he helpfully tells us in the text what it is. He says, you were alienated from God and were enemies in your mind. In your mind. And I've never really woken up in the morning and been like, today I really want to be an enemy of God. I'm going to take on God today. I'm going to be his enemy. I've never done that. But as I started studying this, I realized how easy it is for my mind to move off course and outside of the beauty that God has intended for me to live in, and live in darkness and despair and at enmity with God. He says, you were alienated in your mind because of your evil behavior. So your evil behavior, your past record of sins, is written down, and you are holding on to it in your mind and letting it keep you from who God is. You have written your own ticket to be distant from him. And he is saying all of this inside of you keeps your mind from knowing who God is and from turning to him. It's this record against us, I think, is something where we tally up all the things we've done wrong, all the reasons we are unworthy, all the reasons why no one should love me, all the reasons why I'm not good enough for this, and I keep them on my little list, and I pull them out anytime I start to get close. I say, no, not me. Nope, there's not a place for me in this. I think I often forget where my car is parked at Costco, but I never forget the stupid thing I did 10 years ago. I can tell you that, no problem. And we are really good at remembering what we should forget and forgetting what we should remember. We should remember that we are already purchased, we are already bought, we are already loved by God and known by Him and seen by Him and cherished by Him, forgiven by Him. But we constantly replay the ways that we are at enmity with Him. And then when God isn't enough, what we tend to do, or when we feel like we can't get to Him, we are built with a God-shaped hole in our soul, and so we tend to create little gods that we can serve, little gods that we think might accept us. So becoming like Jesus, Dallas Willard says, is really the orientation of our whole person around God, around the person and purpose of Jesus. We direct ourselves, our human condition, to the love of God, and we see all things through that. So what is the human condition? It is, Dallas Willard asserts, 6 things. We are all made up of 6 particular things. They are thoughts, feelings, or emotions, decisions, relational context, physical body, and soul. Just those 6 things, that's what you are. All that flows out of you is the product of those 6 things. And in fact, the first 3 things, thoughts, feelings, decisions, are like an interconnected web that create this hub in our life that we sometimes call the heart in the Bible. Thoughts tend to come before emotions, but then decisions come out of both those things. We make decisions from our thinking, and we also make decisions from our emotions. Because I know this, I tell myself nearly every day, you need to go for a run today. I mean, my brain tells me go for a run, but my feelings tell me, no, eat the Pop-Tart. That's how my life goes. No, it's really cold outside. It's really rainy. The rain will clear up soon. Ha. It's not going to clear up soon. We often make decisions out of all the things involved, thoughts and feelings. They come together and they create this network. And when we can orient those things around the love of God, we flourish. We begin to become like Him. We begin to be more brave and peaceful and faithful. We have insight into things we didn't know before. When we begin to orient ourselves around the love of God in that way, good things happen. But I'm telling you, our mind is squirrely. It's hard. It's hard to get it to go where we want it to go. We think anywhere between 12,000 and 75,000 thoughts per day and make upwards of 35,000 decisions per day. If you're exhausted sitting there right now, no wonder. You've been deciding stuff all morning and you don't even realize it. We're always making decisions. We're always dealing with thoughts. In fact, another statistic that's really interesting is about 80% of it doesn't matter whether you're 12,000 or 75,000 or maybe you're one of the 120,000, which I think is mine. But it doesn't matter how many thoughts you think, about 80% of those thoughts are negative. And about 80% of those thoughts are automatic. They're the thoughts you thought yesterday and the day before and a week ago Tuesday and last year at this time. Automatic negative thinking takes over most of our thinking. And so our thoughts create all these networks, and from our thoughts and emotions, we make decisions. And so can you see how out of these numbers, we are building a life? We have maybe planted a garden. If your mind is a garden and you plant 75,000 seeds in it every day, what are you growing from those seeds? What are you growing in that space? It is actually, that's my grandbaby, we'll excuse it. So we're looking at this hub and saying, when this happens, when my engagement with who Jesus is usually starts in my mind, and my engagement with who Jesus is typically also stops in my mind. My mind will stop it if I let it. Left to their own devices, my thoughts will not naturally lead me toward peace and health and wholeness. That's not an automatic for me. If you plant a garden in your backyard this spring, and you till it all up, and you get it all planted, and you get it weeded, and you get everything right, and then you walk away and you go, okay, garden, take over the yard. Just hope the cultivated area will just reach out, and you'll wake up tomorrow and the garden will be twice this size. You wake up the next day and the garden will be in the neighbor's yard too. Nope. What takes over what? Weeds take over. The uncultivated land will always take over the cultivated land. We have to participate in the cultivation of thoughts that lead us toward the grace and goodness of God. We have to participate. It's a part. It's something that we're in. Paul also wrote this to the church in Rome. Here he's speaking of humanity in general. He says, and I want to just remind you, it's hard being human. It's hard having a human brain in a noisy, difficult, sinful world. But Jesus did it. Jesus showed up. He took on the human condition. He knows what it's like to wrestle with 75,000 thoughts. He knows what it's like to deal with infinite emotions. Jesus knows. He did it. So here's what Paul says to the church in Rome. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. They knew God, but they didn't glorify him. They knew God, but their minds failed to be impressed with him. They didn't see him as big as he was. They didn't see him for who he truly was because their thinking was futile. In the Greek, this word futile means vain, foolish, idolatrous. And then he describes this darkness that covers their understanding and their hearts. This is internal darkness and internal futility that keeps us separated from the reality and the presence of God. And in the absence of his presence, we create little gods and we build them up in our minds as something bigger than they are. I have a kind of complicated relationship with idols because I want them to be big enough to be cool, but I also want them to be small enough that I can control. And if I'm honest, that's usually my problem with God, is he's big and wonderful and I know it, but I also know I can't control that. And the human condition in me says I'm much safer with things that I can put on my nightstand and just sort of worship from afar. And God's saying, that's not what I want from you. I want you up close. I want to be in the fabric of your life. I want to be in all the rooms of your house. I want to be in all the spaces of the garden. Our minds can easily become this shrine for all kinds of unworthy gods. Because our idols today really are different. They used to actually craft idols, and then they would put them in their house, and they would worship them, and they would do little sacrifices to them and stuff. And I don't think we really do that anymore. I think now we exchange the glory of the immortal God for things that look like a job promotion or a boyfriend or paid off mortgage or anything that gives a bit of temporary happiness but cannot provide permanent satisfaction. Our minds can easily take on these little gods, and these mini ones keep us separated from Jesus, from friendship with him. They keep us from seeing him as he truly is and separated from his presence. So what is the answer? Our text tells us, it says, once you were alienated and you were enemies in your mind because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Once you were distant and separated, and now you are reconciled. Reconciled means restored relationship, harmonious friendship. The distance between us has been bridged by what? By Christ's own body. Christ, his death on the cross, bridges this space between us and God. And Jesus says, now I invite you into it. Do you remember the moment on the cross when it says the veil in the temple is torn? And in the Holy of Holies, where it used to be only a handful of people could go in, and they did it at risk of their own lives. And now the veil is torn, so even the riffraff can come in. Everybody from the cheap seats, everybody get on the field. You're all in the game now. That's what Jesus did on the cross. He made it possible. And then we get to choose, will I move toward him? Will I go his way? We can know God and believe in Jesus and still let our thoughts live distant from the reality of his power in our world and in our lives. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that I was studying about peace, ironically, and excited to teach. And I was sitting in my office before church, and I just felt a dark cloud come over my mind, just darkness and despair, and like, what is happening in our world, and why are things so bad, and things are so hard, and just a really a feeling of being really distant from God. And I stopped and I thought, wait a minute, I don't have to live this way. This is not the will of God for my life. It is not the will of God for my life to move through this whole whatever amount of years I've got on planet Earth, knowing that I've got the assurance of heaven, but living like hell in my mind, trapped by thoughts that keep me unsettled and angry and frustrated and prideful and dissatisfied, and all the things that are wrapped up in not truly running everything through who Jesus is. We can exist in the awareness that we have eternal life, but not experience it here on earth. Or I think we can say, I believe this is for now. The will of God for me and the way of Jesus is for us to walk into the conquering victory that he has for us. He conquered sin and death for us, to walk into that and let him bring healing to our thoughts, healing to our emotions, healing to the way we process those things and make decisions. Because our minds otherwise can run away with us and make us feel really miserable. Another time, Paul talks to the church at Corinth in 2 Corinthians 10, and he says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. What is discipleship? Thought by thought by thought by thought by thought. What do I think about God today? What do I think about who he is and how beautiful he's been and how magnificent he is in our world and in my life? That's a better place to start than Twitter, promise. How's the world doing today? Don't start there. Don't ever start there. You can move into that, but start with, who is God today? Is he still in control? Is he still in charge? Is his death on the cross still effective for me today? Does he still have a plan for my life and for America and for our world? Is he still supreme? Is he still preeminent? Is he still all the things Paul just told me he was? And if he is, then why am I living like a spectator, far from who he is, wondering, when do I get in the game, and why do I feel miserable with my life? Thought by thought by thought. Where do we start when our thoughts get dark and our hearts feel darkened by the futility of our thinking? I think we can just start with one preeminent truth. What is the prevailing truth in any situation? It could be that your life really is hard and it really is bad right now, and there really are things that you are terrified of, or there really are idolatrous relationships that you feel trapped in. And so what is the truth on which we can set our minds? Here's one. Jesus died on the cross because of his great love for me, and I am safe in that love. From now until the day I die, till my last breath, I am safe in the love of God no matter what. No matter what. That doesn't have anything to do with my checkbook or my schedule or my job or my whatever, but I can tell you, this is a truth I can take to the bank. And when I start to say it over and over and over again, it begins to direct my thinking. It begins to rebuild neural pathways that have gotten really lazy and easy to slip into this thing of, why God? Why doesn't God love me? Why does he love people better than me? Why does he really love me? Am I too far gone? No, you are safe in the love of God no matter what. Believe it. Set your mind on it. In a few weeks, we're going to look ahead at Colossians 3. And Paul's going to tell us again, if you're risen with Christ, set your mind on things above. I don't know how to make that any simpler or any easier. I mean, I get it. This is hard, but it is. How do I set my mind on things above? By setting my mind on things above. That's the only thing I know. I mean, I don't have a cheat code for that. But as we do it, it builds habits, and the habits build power, and we begin to be people who are thinking differently than the people around us. And we're no longer controlled by a bad day or bad emotions or frustrating news on CNN. It will always be there. You will never escape it. So the only answer to the external crises of our world is to build some internal peace. And to build thoughts that say, Jesus has reconciled me. He laid his life down to bridge the gap between me and his peace. And I am going to think on that over and over and over and over again. Think about it. He may whisper in those moments when you start to silence yourself and isolate your thoughts and say, why do I feel the way I feel? He may whisper some things he'd like you to do so that you can feel better. He may say, hey, there's maybe a note you need to write or an apology you need to make or something you need to do for your spouse or somebody you maybe need to ask forgiveness for. There may be some kind of action in that, but he has already welcomed you into his presence just by his death on the cross. Just come to me. Bring me your stuff. This process in our thoughts and feelings and decisions is part of what Paul is saying in the last part of the text here. He says, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. So you will not be alienated from God anymore. You were, but you won't be if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and don't move from the hope held out in the gospel. And I'm just going to tell you, frankly, I don't love the word if in the Bible. It frustrates me a lot, and I had a really wrong mindset about it for about 30 years. I used to be one of those people. It comes a little bit from I have a Mennonite background, and there's that if I, then God. If I dress right, date right, talk right, eat right, do the right thing, then God will keep my kids safe, or then God will bless me, or then God will give me the promotion, or then God, if I do the right things, then God is for me and on my side. But first I do it, and then he does it. So the word if can get weird, but that is not the if Paul is talking about in this. That is not his context here. In this context, Paul is saying, we've been talking about the beautiful gift of Jesus' death on the cross and the benefits it bought for us. And those benefits cannot be taken from you or earned. Grace cannot be taken from you or earned. There is no, it can't. The only if in receiving salvation is if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth, Jesus is the Son of God, you will be saved. That's the only if. It's a very low point of entry. Lower even than getting a Costco card, really. Just believe in your heart and confess with your mouth, you will be saved. And for the love of God, there's no entry point. Before he formed you in the womb, he saw you and knew you and was crazy about you. The love of God, you can't do anything about that. You don't have to believe it, but I'm just telling you, he's going to love you whether or not you do. So that's no ifs there. This if has to do with Jesus has forgiven and closed the distance between us, and we participate by being established and firm, by holding to the hope held out in the gospel. We have a participation. I don't want to call it an obligation. I want to call it a privilege. We are honored to participate in the work of God in our lives. We are part of the gardeners of our own mind. So what do we do to keep our mind working toward the person and purpose of Jesus and not away from it? First thing I think we do is guard the garden gate. I mean, what do you let into your mind that may be antithetical to the love of Jesus? I have to be really careful with, I can't watch scary movies. I will be immersed in fear. It's not because God isn't powerful enough or good enough or whatever. It's that I can't throw a bunch of seed in the garden and hope something else grows. So what is it that I let in my mind? I can't spend extended time with people who are constantly negative. It makes me negative too. I want to surround myself as much as I can with people who also hold to the hope held out in the gospel, because they move me that way in my thoughts. So in all of this, we see you can guard. You have some responsibility to guard what's happening in your mind. Isolate and say, that doesn't get to come in. I don't have to believe that. If someone speaks something over your life and that you know is not true, just be like, oh, thanks so much. I don't receive that. I'm not going to actually believe that. I don't believe lies. I only am going to believe truth, and that doesn't seem like truth to me. Guard yourself from the lies that want to swamp the boat. And then feed the soil good things. Fill the garden with good things, with worship, with the word. This week, just read Colossians through. It's just a great way to throw some good seed in there. Read Colossians before you go to bed. Read a scripture so that it kind of ruminates in your mind so you can think through it as you're sleeping and you're not waking up to terrors instead. Fill your soil with good things. I can no longer start my day with the news, social media. For goodness sake, I can't do it. I can almost see the garden of my mind just shriveling up and being like, we're just all done here. So feed it good things. And then you start to take every thought captive, and then you start to flourish, and it's beautiful. I want us to be people who bear fruit, that will reach out over the wall and into our wilderness world. I want us to be people who understand what it's like to live in the gift of salvation, not just the promise of heaven, but the promise of free, good, liberated life today in our thinking. Knowing we are accepted and loved and without accusation. That is beautiful. So we're going to just sing through this chorus one more time. And I'd love for you to just allow Jesus to speak to your thoughts today. And then I'm going to come back and close. Of your own mind, and you feel like your thoughts keep taking you toward darkness, toward unworthiness, toward hopelessness, any of those things, will you please will you please meet with one of our elders this morning? They would love to pray with you. They're not going to be weird. They're just going to pray with you and join with you and help say, Jesus already paid for this for you. Jesus sacrificed his blood and body on the cross so that you could come close to God's presence, so that he can heal you and hold you and set you free from the kind of thoughts that create anxiety and turmoil. And for some of you, perhaps even the kind of hopelessness that leads you to wonder if it's even worth it anymore. And if that is you, please, will you pray with an elder before you go? I believe that we are going to be a house that knows the garden matters and our participation in it matters. Will you stand with me and let's say the benediction? If you'd like to receive it, would you put your hands out in front of you? May you be people whose thoughts are captivated by your one true love. May you be those who delight in the supremacy of Christ in your life, who know the glory of the one who created you for him and to him and through him. And may you find freedom this week and companionship in the friendship of Jesus Christ. In the name of the one who sets us free. Amen. We love you so, so much. And there are, I would like to say, pancakes next week. Love you. We'll see you next weekend.